problem. At a time of devastation in the 400-year battle for equity, Antonio, who has seen his own share of personal devastation with the loss of his dear mother in 2018, decided to help others and the city he loves in his own way. I and the board applaud Antonio for doing his best to restore a neighborhood he loves and sees as beautiful. Thank you, Antonio, for being upstanding, for being a solution seeker, and for knowing when it's time to roll up your sleeves and get a good job done. So please join me in watching this WKBW news story about Antonio. Mike, if you could please play the video.
Can anyone hear?
Oh, we need volume, Mike.
Sorry about that.
Into all of this violence, doing everything they can. There are stories of hope that shine during dark times. We showed you earlier how volunteers came out to Bailey Avenue in Buffalo this morning to help clean up the mess there. One of the very first volunteers to show up, a teenager. It was 2 in the morning. He spoke with 7 Eyewitness News reporter Olivia Proya about leading a movement now to clean up the streets.
It was 2 in the morning. Antonio Gwynn was watching Facebook live streams of police activity on Bailey Avenue in Buffalo.
Well, yeah, I was actually on the couch, but yeah, I was in bed.
The 18-year-old Hutch Tech senior was struck by the amount of violence and destruction.
I felt disgusted. My nerves were bad because it's like they're destroying a city that can actually be very beautiful.
So he got up and got dressed because he says he knew he had to do something.
I went and bought some trash bags, grabbed my broom and then my dustpan, and I just started here. It was just me by myself. So I just started riding up and down Bailey to see where everything was destroyed and stuff at so I can clean it up.
Kayla Bishop organized a group to come help out. When they arrived this morning at 10, they found the majority of the mess taken care of. And Antonio, hard at work, a full 8 hours after he initially started cleaning.
To know that an 18-year-old had it in his heart to come out here at 2 in the morning and clean up, and to be honest, he kind of risked his life to do it. That's amazing.
I wanted to clean because it's like I'm always cleaning at my house, so why can't I just help the city stay clean?
It's something he says he hopes would make his late mom proud.
It's something that she would do probably, because I mainly try to be just like her or like something similar, because I don't want to be a follower all my life. I want to lead sometimes also.
A lot of people need to take insight on that and be more like Antonio.
In Buffalo, Olivia Proya, 7 Eyewitness News.
Are you feeling stuck inside? It's
What a great story.
Thank you.
Say hello to you is Antonio Gwynn. Antonio, would you like to say hello to the board?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Gwynn.
Hi, Antonio.
Hello.
Hi, Antonio.
Again, Antonio, on behalf of the board.
Antonio.
Dr. go ahead.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Antonio.
Good afternoon.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what would you like to do after you graduate from Hutch Tech?
Well, I recently got offered a scholarship at Madai College.
Oh,
so I was going to now go there for business.
Excellent. What kind of business are you thinking about in the future? You got any ideas about it?
Well, also right now I'm trying to open up my moving and cleaning business.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good to me.
That's beautiful. Well, we're so proud of you and so grateful for what you have done and the kind of leadership you have provided for all of us. And you keep doing that, and the world indeed will be a better place. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Antonio, this is Sharon Belton Cotman, President of the Board of Education. I want to stand in the gap between the ancestors and the present people in your lives and say that we're very proud of you that you stepped forward. In regards to your moving business, have you established a name for it, or do you have a contact information? I would like to know that information as soon as you get it if you don't have it.
Well, the name of it was going to be Tweety's Movers.
Okay. And what number, and how would we reach you if we wanted to utilize your services or refer you customers?
It would be 716-510-8272.
So are you up and ready with your cleaning operation? Because you certainly needed to have a t-shirt on the other day because you represented.
Well, not yet. I'm trying to learn about how to get my licenses and stuff for it.
Okay, so I have a friend that has a moving company. I would be happy to connect you and him together. He would be happy to share whatever he knows and help mentor you in that. Okay, I'm going to reach out to him and I'm going to ask him to at least talk with you and tell you the steps that he took to get into the moving business. Okay?
All right.
All right. That's what I'm talking about. That's how we connect.
Can I say a word quickly?
Sure.
Antonio, I'd like to say thank you, first of all, for the board of reaching out to Antonio on his marvelous words. Antonio, that's my neighborhood. I grew up there. I grew up on Cortlandt Street, a couple of blocks from there, and played on Bailey my whole life, and the church that you was in front of was Mount Alpine Presbyterian Church. My parents go there. My parents go to that church, and it's a blessing, man, to see you out there working, coming up 2 o'clock in the morning to help show the neighborhood that there is a tomorrow, that there is a promise, and you are a specimen of promise. To see that, man, it's you have a great destiny in your life, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that you secure it, that you succeed in it. And thank you for cleaning up my neighborhood, man, and being there, and you got a good heart inside of you, and that's gonna take you a long ways.
Thank you.
And let's work to get your NWBE status. While you in college, let's work to get that for you. Okay, call me, look me up, call me, send me an email, and we'll work to get that done for you.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mrs. Cotman. Antonio, you enjoy the rest of the evening.
You as well.
Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, Antonio. Thanks for joining us.
And your mom would be very proud of you, young man.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, who's up?
Ms. Wood, on the first committee.
Okay, welcome to the Finance and Ops Committee meeting. And we're picking up some items that we didn't go over in the special budget meeting, starting off with the 4-year plan, which Jeff will walk us through that. But it basically to our attention how great is the need for us to raise additional revenues and also to guard our fund balance, because you'll see from the presentation that we will need every dollar that we have in our fund balance. Then the other items, we were not able to go over the grant funds at the special board meeting, and that is a very important area because it was $123 million area. So it's a significant source of funds and programs, and it is sustaining a cut. It's dropping to 105 to 106 million. So we do need to take a look at that. That's a $7.5 million reduction. And it's significant because the grants fund staffing And in some of these grants, as Jeff goes over them, you'll see that Title I, the FTE is dropping from 267 down to 31, 231. That's a significant number of, and so I just wanted to give all of us board members a chance to hear and see what's happening with our grant fund, because if you hear about cutbacks or layoffs or something, it may be related, probably will be related to the cut in Title I and Title II. So the other item that we're on the agenda to be addressed is the progress report on the what the board agreed back in November to ask Dr. Cash to take the lead on getting an interdepartment, interagency, intermunicipal agreement to protect our fund balance, and they're going to give an update on that. So those are the items. I believe each of them are critical, and I wanted each of the board members to be aware of that. The only other thing I want to say is thank you, Dr. Cash, for when we went over to general fund. Thank you for your commitment to continue the equity funding, and that you did say, and you, Jeffrey, you gave us the positions that were added last year, and Dr. Cash, thank you for agreeing to continue those, and also you agreed to do some additional equity funding items so that we build on that and continue in that direction. For that, I'm greatly appreciative. I'm sure the board is. Dr. Cash?
Yeah, there's a caveat to that. The caveat is that if this budget holds, that's my commitment. We're in a fluid environment, and we'll have to continue to monitor the situation going forward. Colleagues, I would recommend that we look at a 4-slide presentation that our CFO, Mr. Pritchard, has prepared for you. We sent materials to you yesterday afternoon, and hopefully you've had a chance to review those. And if you have any questions, certainly you can bring those forward this evening. But we were trying to be efficient and get some materials to you in advance. The 4-year plan itself is a large document. It's probably close to 70 pages. So I don't recommend we go through that complete document, rather give a high-level summary. And then if you had specific questions contained within that document, we'll try to address them. The other item I think we should address within this 4-slide presentation is the last piece that you have for your agenda tonight, the Ed Law 2580. We just have a few bulleted points to make about that. And then you will have addressed the first 2 out of the 3 items, and then we save the grant conversation for last. Mr. Pritchard also provided excerpt out of the larger budget document of the grants pages. I believe there were something like pages 61 through 64. So if that's agreeable to you, Mr. Pritchard, if you would begin, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, board members. Mike Lucci, could you just advance the slide? All right, there it is. So as the superintendent mentioned, I'll go over a summary of the 4-year financial plan, and then we can go over questions as we go along. And I'm pretty much just going to highlight, I think, the main takeaways that I see out of the document, and essentially how it kind of pushes our thinking for how we proceed from here and into subsequent years. So, we developed the existing 4-year financial plan in June 2017. That was when the document was approved by the board, and we've added a year to it ever since. We've up until the 2021 year, we've done very well against the 4-year plan. And in the actual budget document, starting on page 3 and going all the way to actually it goes to page 6, I have sort of a summary of historical and current and future projections. And then they're also compared against the original projections. And then on page 6, I have the variance between the two. So that's like if there's one page in there that I typically look at, that's very important. It's those pages there, just to get a feel for, all right, what does our budget look like in a summary form, and how does it compare against that financial plan? The 4-year financial plan is one of the requirements of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. So the control board, it requires that as a soft control board right now. Their primary work surrounds the analysis of our budget, our multi-year 4-year plan, and also our quarterly updates to the budget. So this is an important document for them that we do each year in conjunction with the budget. So from 2017 to 2019, we had met or exceeded the overall targets of the plan, meaning we revenues matched revenues, expenditures, we actually were lower on expenditures than projected. We had been targeting, and we're targeted to be structurally balanced in the 2021 fiscal year. And that's important because that was one of the goals of the plan, was to put sort of that budget, a methodology in place that would allow us to be balanced. And a lot of what we did to do that had to do with cost savings initiatives, avoiding costs we could avoid, generate revenues where we can, maximize revenues where we can. We've talked about these, a number of times, including with the budget. So on pages 13 to 25 of the plan, you can see the results of those initial items that are in there. And, oftentimes, some of the biggest areas where we had found savings was in health insurance, just by some of those, some tweaks that we've done, negotiating new contracts with bargaining units and so forth. So you can read all of those, if to the extent that you want to. You can see the details going back 2 years I show in this plan. And if you go to the web, you can see prior versions of this, so you can see you can see the progression every year. Now, the coronavirus has significantly altered the trajectory of our revenues, which we already know that. And again, these are outside of our control for the most part anyways. We can do things to maximize, we can, and we need to. We can try to find new revenue sources, but in large part, state aid is what drives us. And that appears at this point to the growth that we've had over about the last 9 or 10 years has now stopped, and there's no certainty when that's going to restart itself. And a couple of sub-points that I have in here that I think are important to make is that over a 3-year period from 2017, 18 through 19, 20, when we put the plan together, we projected basically it's $2.29 billion or combined in state aid over 3 years. The actual state aid was within $2 million of that. So we had put in reasonable assumptions that were based on the last several years prior to that, and we're essentially within 0.1% over that 3-year period in state aid. And again, state aid being about 20 or 85% of our budget, that's a significant driver for us. And the plan numbers and the actuals came out almost identical. You really couldn't get any closer. But the next little sub-bullet here, in 2021, state aid, we had projected, again, from using the same methodology and done at the same time, that state aid was going to be $803 million. But it's projected to be $738 million. So that's a 1-year reduction or difference of $65 million or 8.1%. So over 3 years, we were right on. We had made these projections. This 4th year that we're now in shows a significant difference, and that shows how quickly things can happen. because it's state aid, it impacts future years as well. So, Mike, if you could push to the next slide, please. So this little excerpt that I have in here is from page 11 of the document, and what I'm showing here is really just describing a lot of what I just talked about previously. What in terms of the budget and how we do it. So there's a summary where you have year 4 of the plan. So the 4th and final year of the plan is the 2021 budget, and then I always keep it a 4-year plan. So I've added year 5, 6, and 7. So I've got total revenues, total expenditures, and then a budgetary surplus, the first line in bold, a budgetary surplus or deficit before planned use of fund balance. So if you look at the 2021 year, that's where you'll see that $50 million gap that we have. And then right below that, planned use of fund balance. So the 30 million carryover from 1920. And then 20 million of existing fund balance allows us to balance the budget. And then there's no gap closing measures that are outlined in the 2021 budget, because essentially we have a balanced budget. That doesn't mean that we're not going to try and do things to maximize revenues, reduce costs, whatever the case may be, wherever we can. But that's not required to balance the budget. We have a balanced budget. But when you go to year 5, 6, and 7, you'll see that we're going to be carrying forward a deficit from 50 million up to next year closer to 65 million. And then the year after 60, and the year after that 45 million. Those 4 years, 2020, 21 through 23, 24, those 4 years have a cumulative deficit of 220 million, which is, it's coincidence, but that's essentially our entire fund balance. And again, much of our fund balance is restricted or it's assigned for other purposes. So we're in a position now, based on what has happened with state aid, that we're going to have to grapple with these deficits for the next several years. Now, one thing I do not have in here is I don't have any assumptions for further state aid cuts. So the state aid in the 2021 year is based on the adopted state budget. If the state, and the governor has mentioned that this is a possibility, makes further reductions, and those reductions are not offset by federal aid, then our deficit in 2021 could grow. And then quite likely in the subsequent years, it would grow as well. We've found in the past that when the state essentially resets things through, the last recession, the state put in what was called the gap elimination adjustment. And what that did, it was essentially a deficit closing measure for the state. And they implemented it as a negative, I think it was about a $25 million reduction to our state aid. And that stayed in state aid for the next 5 years. So the reductions that we're dealing with now are likely to stay with us for a period of time. So I have sort of moderate state revenue growth. We'll know more in about a year, depending on how the economy starts to turn around, how quickly it turns around, if we can expect a quicker ramp up. But it's likely that we're going to have lower state aid for the next couple of years compared to the year prior. And this is almost a mirror image. My guess is that this will be a mirror image of the last recession, where we went about a 4-year period with essentially no revenue growth. In fact, revenue shrinkage during that time. So that's quite possible here as well. And it really, I guess it's up to the economists to give us a guess as to how that might look, because some folks are saying the economy is going to turn around in a month or two. Others are saying this is going to be a worse recession than we had back in 2009, 2010. I do a weekly call with the Council of Great City Schools, the CFOs from around the nation. And the ones that were around and heavily involved at that time in 2009 have a feeling, and again, it's just a feeling from their experience, that this is going to be worse than that. So, you know, I take it for what it is. That's just their experience telling you that. But in any event, we've got significant deficits that we're going to have to grapple with. So how will we deal with that? So, and I'm just showing the summary here below. After there's the budgetary surplus after planned use of fund balance. So in the subsequent years, I do not have at this point a planned use of fund balance. That doesn't mean that we won't use fund balance. Go below, and there's 4 gap closing measures that are listed that are shown on the chart. And the first one on there is revenue and other fund balance. So some of that is revenue maximization that we could do, but a large portion of that revenue and other fund balance is the potential use of fund balance. So the district has, over the last several years, been very fiscally conservative. We've built up a reserve that is prudent to do when times are good. And then when times become more difficult, that is a time when we need to look at, for budgetary purposes, utilizing some of that fund balance. And then the idea would be that when times are good again, you would build up and make sure you have sufficient reserves. To the extent that we don't or didn't have these reserves, you know, we'd be talking about pretty much essentially we'd have to either do deficit borrowings, or we would have to do heavy reductions in cost. Now, that's still quite likely because you've got a $64 million or $65 million deficit next year projected. I think to maintain a strong fund balance position at the end of 4 years, you'd only probably want to use about 85 million of that, and that would leave, I think, around 120 or so of fund balance at the end of 4 years, and that's probably the minimum that the GFOA, the Government Fiscal Officer Association, would say we should have as fund balance for a district of this size, and that's including both for cash flow purposes. We'll talk about this in a little bit. That, you know, if you're a governmental entity and you have cash, you have revenues that come throughout the year and expenditures that come throughout the year. The timing of those don't always line up. You need to have sufficient reserves on hand so that way you don't have to borrow during the year. That's an ideal situation, is you don't want to have to borrow in anticipation of revenues, because then you have to pay that back with interest. It potentially harms your debt rating. So when you have to do long-term borrowings for capital improvements, you may be paying higher rates, and so forth. So prudent use of fund balance, there is an amount on there, potential for that. Efficiencies and savings is the next line in there, and you know, those are areas that we're always looking at in terms of procurement, different things we can do on health insurance. They're listed again in page 13 to 25 of the plan. Those are all listed. The other cost reductions, that's the third of the gap closing measures that I included on there. That includes an estimate or a number that basically I attached to the growth that the district has had in staffing since 2014-15. So this was a number that we looked at and said, all right, let's look at the total staff that we've added during that period of time, and potentially if we have to start reducing, we would reduce from there. So you know, we may have to get into further reductions of costs, both whether it be staffing costs or contracts, other programs, and things like that. So big deficits that are in, you know, $50-60 million range. That's not, you know, that's not something that we're going to get in state aid growth, for instance. You know, in a good year, state aid growth was about $25 million. So if you have a gap more than that, then that's where additional measures might need to be taken. So with all this, there's going to be a mixture in the subsequent years of, there'll be some and again, it's probably prudent to do this, utilization of some fund balance. We need to hit everything we can. Health insurance, issue an RFP for employee health insurance, see if we can get some savings there. Look at all of our expiring contracts, make sure we're maximizing. This is where MWBEs come in. You want to maximize the number of vendors that are out there that are bidding on your items, because the more competition you have, the more likely you're not having that one vendor that just thinks they can charge you whatever they want because they know that there's competition. So a lot of different things there. But again, we may have to look at further cost reductions. So this page is certainly very important. We have, I think we have the ability to do this to based on our current budget now, deal with this in the coming year. But as we know, a lot of this is very fluid, and we just don't know what may be coming down the pipeline in the next month or so, including the potential for additional federal aid that may help restore things. So these are all very much unknown at this point, but it's likely we'll be dealing with some significant budgetary restrictions in the coming years. And I don't have it on this page, but one of the projections for if you had seen this document from the prior year, again, we were in the ballpark of $10 to $20 million deficits we were looking at based on the projections. So we've definitely these have been bumped up, and it's really all based on state aid. Mike, could you go to the next slide, please? This slide, you've seen this probably many times, and it's very similar to the previous slide. It's just looking at it in a graphical format. So the red line and the green line are actual and then projected revenues and expenditures. And where there's a difference, when the red line is above the green line, that means that you have a deficit, either an actual deficit or a projected deficit. When the green line's on top, that means that there is a surplus. So I cut off a couple of the earlier years just to make this a little easier to see, but if you look at 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, you can see that expenditures had exceeded revenues for those 3 years, and then then we had some going back and forth essentially over that time. In the last 2 years, we're looking at surpluses, but that flips around starting next year. And I marked in there with that little two-sided arrow and it says gap, the gaps that we have between the red and the green, the red and the green lines. So I'm also including on there a blue line. That blue line shows the projected revenues that we had previously. So the impact of the coronavirus on our revenues was essentially to take what I had as that blue line for the revenues, which was, again, very within striking distance on an annual basis, close enough to the expenditures that we're developing a budget that doesn't require significant cost reductions or anything like that to balance. And essentially, the further out you go, the closer they get. So that was where we were essentially in that close to structural balance. But that blue line is no longer the projection anymore. The reduction in state aid that we're looking at, well, the reduction in overall revenues, and it includes county sales tax and so forth, is now pushed much lower than that blue line. So that's where these gaps come from. And this is, this chart is something that I look at all the time, because that's everything that we do on the revenue side boils down into that revenue line, and the expenditure side boils down into that total expenditure line. And over time, and when you look out multiple years out into the future, this doesn't paint a great picture right now. But we're going to know more again in later on this year, and as we get into next year's budget, hopefully if things hold where they are, we'll have a better picture. We can paint a better picture of where things will be. But we're still going to have to press down that red line in those future years if we can't get the green line to get up to match it. Because if we don't, we'll run out of money essentially. So that's really at a summary level what I wanted to go over with the document. I mean, that's the main takeaway that I take out of the 4-year plan. I think, you know, when the control board looks at it, essentially that's what they're looking at. You know, what does it say in terms of your revenues and expenditures? Do we have sufficient resources and or actions that we can take to balance in coming years, depending on what happens? So, you know, this is you know, it's obviously a complex document, and I'm trying to boil it down as simple as I can for presentation purposes, but that's really what it does boil down to. So I don't know if there's any questions at this point.
Jeff, that's a good summary, given the complexity of the 4-year plan. Colleagues, I would recommend that we stop at that point and see if you have any
Sharon has a question.
Comments on the 4-year plan. And
Sharon
Mike,
has a
I would
question.
recommend you either keep it up or take it down so we can see hands and get your question.
Sharon Cotman, raise her hand, and then Terrence Hurd.
I just have a simple question. Is there, what is the next scheduled release of funds from the state? Do you have, has a schedule been provided to us, Jeff, at this point, or anything that you know on such and such date the state is going to release, or et cetera? Do you have a timeline or anything?
Yes. So we're still expecting June payments from the state. So we're expecting we still have to close out the 1920 year, but the state schedules at the beginning of the year when these individual payments will come. So there's payments in June, I think July and August, and then next year's state aid typically starts in October.
Okay, so we're good for this year. It's just 2021 school year that you're concerned with, 2020-21.
Right.
We
Well,
are our funds that were budgeted for last year, right?
Yeah, the 20. So I feel pretty comfortable with where we will finish the 1920 year. So that this year, I don't expect the state to come and take any of that aid away. So, you know, everything that was already scheduled to be paid to us, we should receive. And we do a cash flow projection, and we have that already for next year based on the state aid numbers that were in the adopted budget. And as long as that adopted state budget holds, those cash payments from the state will be paid as scheduled over the coming year.
Did you see the article in the Wall Street Journal that said that the state is not going to be able to make that June payment, and that they have delayed it? And that was pretty much put out there, and it was in the Wall Street Journal. Several budget people sent that article to me. I thought I forwarded it to you guys.
Paulette, we can't see you. Your camera's blocked. Thank you.
What did you hear what I said though?
I did. I've not seen that article, but I'd be happy to review it because that's very important if that's the case.
Yeah, I did forward it. I believe I sent it to you, Dr. Cash, and Darren Brown, because the significance was that they're also not going to pay the municipalities their June payment, which is a concern for us because $98 million the city of Buffalo thought they would be receiving on that time frame, not going to happen according to the Wall Street Journal. I just wanted to know, what do we anticipate doing if those payments are delayed for both us and the other municipalities? Does it cause a problem for us? Would our finances, if it's delayed? What's the impact when the city of Buffalo doesn't get it?
Depends on how much it is. I haven't seen the article. I'd like to see the article, and then we could answer that for you.
I will send it again, but I'm just saying, if we don't, because the state is not receiving their revenues, the federal government has moved back filings. So if we do not receive the June payment, as long as we receive it at some point, we'll be okay.
What's the June payment scheduled to be, Jeff?
Do I have that handy? Bear with me a second. I can try to find it. June payments, Board of Ed. 25 million. Well, and also lottery aid, but that's that would probably be a different source. So roughly 10 million in basic aid, 15 million in excess cost aid, and lottery aid of 19 million. They've provided us, because the lottery aid is actually an advance that we get. They've already provided us the mechanism to make that request. They've not mentioned anything to us, but we will definitely research this, and I look forward to looking at that article.
25 million would have an impact, colleagues.
Yes, what? Yes, I read the same report about state aid to schools that was holding steady, but they said it might be holding steady, but it might be not be able to give it out due to the situation here in New York State and not receiving monies and taxes. That was my question. The secondary question is, the secondary question was applying to the monies that we saved due to the lockdown and transportation and other monies that we saved this year since March 13th to 14th. How would that reflect next year if we were to go virtual? How would Outlook look then?
Terrence, could you, I'm not sure the last part of your question I didn't hear.
Yeah, it's a lot of feedback for some reason. How will the outlook look next year if we looked at the data that we have from this year, since March 14th, since the school closing, the money that we saved, and if we went virtual next year?
So our budget is based on the assumption that we will start paying for transportation again in September. So that's incorporated into our expenditure and our cash flows. Just like the projection that we will not spend in the 1920 years. So to the extent that we don't have transportation costs next year, those funds theoretically could be repurposed for something else, or otherwise. But we are in the budget. We are including transportation costs next year.
Okay.
Someone else, Jen, didn't you have your hand up next?
I did. I just wanted to make sure that I touch base while we're talking about this, that Jeff, if possible, we can, the ad hoc committee that's working on trying to uncover the monies and working to make sure that we're holding our lobbyists and whatnot accountable to be able to get these monies. If we can maybe schedule that meeting for this week and really get your direction as to how we should move forward to make sure we do everything we can to help assist getting these monies. I just wanted to put it out there that we will be working, we will be reaching out this committee to make sure that we're on the same page with who to talk to and what the narrative looks like. And then also I really have questions around the city and borrowing from us, and we're seeing in real time that if the state is not going to be able to really give us the money that we're entitled to, and that's the mechanism that the state's going to use to pay us back, And if we're not going to get it, are they going to get the money? And that's a real concern for me. So I'm just putting out there publicly that we're going to be reaching out. And, you know, as everyone sees, Lou Petrucci is, you know, not here with personal great things happening. So, you know, we've been kind of behind the 8 ball, but this is the goal of the ad hoc committee, to work with you to see where to go, how to get there, and who to talk to, and go from there. So just so you know, look out for us this week. We're coming.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely have work to do, so definitely.
I was at a meeting online with Citizen Action had a meeting, and they had Chuck Schumer speaking about their efforts and Pelosi's efforts to try to steer that HEROES bill through, so that New York State and the city of Buffalo would be whole, because that HEROES money would give $1 billion to the city over 2 years, and it would give more than the $61 billion deficit that the state had. It would make everybody whole. There were significant problems, and it is not realistic to expect them to get that urge of a bill through. So that's definitely in flux. So bailout, the federal bailout money, they're gonna fight for it. They're gonna get something, and we do need to work with them and lobby to get that. But it's a fight. It's a definite fight. They're looking for help.
Yep.
What's next?
Colleagues, are you ready to go on, or do you have more questions? We have this other item in this slide presentation that deals with Ed Law 2580. We can give you a brief update. Mike Lucci, if you could put back up the slide 4. Jeffrey.
Okay. All right. So here, just one quick slide that we can summarize. And we did send, or I sent yesterday, the presentation that we had done back in December on this. So Education Law 2580, funds, custody, and disbursement. And this is very specific to city school districts, 125,000 or more. So that's basically your big 5. We've spoken, we've spoken to a couple outside regulatory agencies. So through the big 5, we talked with the Education Department, New York State Education Department. And, you know, their assessment of the law, regulations, and so forth are that it's, with respect to interest, it's not defined in there anywhere. There's nothing that says what should otherwise be done. Recommendation came back from both the big 5 and the Education Department that it would be best to kind of work behind the scenes, speaking with the city. And that's one thing that the superintendent and I did do. We met with the mayor and his team. I also spoke with the control board as well. They monitor the cash balances of both entities. The cash flow reporting that we do, the 4-year plan, the budgets, the quarterly reporting, and all of the cash flow reporting that we do is reviewed by, monitored by the control board. You know, they reiterated that they do monitor this. They don't have a position on the various things that we've talked about. They certainly said we could request the city to provide notice when they borrow funds, but did not think there was the likelihood of a permanent loss of, and this is my interpretation as well, that the city could not permanently borrow funds and not return them. That would be a misappropriation. That would be from an accounting perspective not possible to do. The city, I reviewed their 4-year financial plan that was submitted to the control board. The city is expecting to have a deficit of $15 million in the 1920 year, and they're anticipating borrowing $15 million from the markets to fill in that gap. They're not anticipating having a permanent borrowing with the Board of Ed. They're anticipating borrowing and generating revenue by a debt issuance in June to fill that gap in. Again, the superintendent and I did speak with the city. They pointed out their position, the practice, their interpretation of the laws, provided a list of all the things that the city does for the Board of Ed. It's definitely, it's a deep relationship. There is the maintenance of effort that we receive. There have been grants. There are other, we have free space in City Hall. There's lots of other contributions that the city makes towards the school district and education in general. And also the note that the city is in a difficult financial position as well, and to the extent that they have to, especially with respect to interest and things, if to the extent that we get more, the Board of Ed gets more, then they have to find commensurate cuts somewhere else, which could potentially impact some of the aid to Board of Ed as well, or to education, as they're in a difficult position. We monitor. I don't have cash balance access to the city on a daily basis, but I look at this every single month end. I mentioned a minute ago the cash balances and cash projections that the Board of Ed and the city do. We're required to do that for the control board. So I prepare our cash balances. I know what our cash is based on our revenues and based on our expenditures. And that information goes and gets compiled with the cities. I can see theirs as well. The city does have a negative cash balance at the end of April. They were projecting a negative cash balance at the end of May, and then they were projecting to be positive at the end of June. Obviously, if things from the state have changed, if the state's not going to make payments to municipalities and school districts in June, that would impact their cash flow and our cash flow. But I don't have that information now. But that's based on the projections that we had. That's where that is. And one of the, I think probably this is one of the big areas is the recommendation is to discuss and develop an action plan as part of the Revenue Generation and Budget Ad Hoc Committee. This probably would be a good way to be able to have the committee take the time to look at all the data that we've gathered so far, look at the information we've provided, and determine best next steps for how we proceed.
Dr. Katz, does that mean that you're going to go back to the board? That in November,
I couldn't hear you.
Dr. Cash, in November, the board was willing and ready unanimously to pass a resolution calling for an agreement with transparency, separation of the accounts, and to the board before using our funds, and even some consideration of some kind of interest, so the public schools benefited from the arrangement. interest, so we wanted some interest revenue. That's what we were prepared to submit as a board resolution. I suggested that we give the respect to you, since you have a good relationship with the mayor and you're our employee, our voice, the voice for the, for the administration, that you would take care of getting or getting some kind of agreement and some transparency, moving this forward. The situation has only become even more urgent because of the city's lack of cash, the state's lack of cash, and our 4-year plan saying we need every dime of our fund balance. So I hearing you say that you want to throw that agreement steps back to the board. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
What you're hearing me say here is that I've had a number of conversations with the mayor. I don't see the mayor willing to make any kind of agreement like that at this time, and that the board, do either ad hoc or through some other measure, could pursue it. But I think it needs to be about relationships. We could talk to the comptroller. We could 5 of us could sit in a conference call together. I think this needs to be tried to be worked out behind the scenes and try to work it out through relationships that we have. I don't think we should strain relationships, as we all are going through the same kind of thing. The city is key, and we are part of the city. And I think that we have to work, whatever we work out needs to be done in a mutual way. And we haven't even had that conversation yet since the coronavirus event has occurred. So I would recommend some members from the ad hoc committee, perhaps Jeff and I included, that would be 5. And then we call for a meeting with the mayor and his team, raise our concerns, or raise the concerns of the board, as I understand them, and then see where we go from there. Anything else is formalizing it, but it also strains the relationship and is not likely to get the result that you want. Because there's different interpretations about what Ed Law 2580 means by the mayor. That's pretty clear to me. And in our prior meeting, we shared the document that laid out what the city's position was.
So as a member of the ad hoc committee, I would like Dr. Cash, if we can really dig deep as to when we can schedule this, and maybe meet before then so we can get ourselves together, get the Board of Education. I would like to reach out to you all to get any of your concerns so we can put them together and meet with our team so we can go to the table with exactly what we need. But I would much rather do this sooner than later, and I'm ready. So let's try and get something in the calendar soon with them.
On that point, my hand is raised. On that point, in regards to the ad hoc committee, can you also expand your scope to include cost reduction as an effort? You have, as part of the revenue generation and budget ad hoc committee, when you have that conversation, can we also talk about cost reductions? Because there has to be something inside of this budget besides skimming positions from the most needed schools that we can, and then to say that that's subject to not possibly being addressed. There has to be cost saving reductions. And what I'm thinking of in particular would be the labor relations piece, the way certain our businesses are being run within our schools, the way the money that's being spent on new new equipment or furniture and things like that without having a full inventory of what we currently have. I just think that there's a lot of areas that we can skim and save money on this year. So I appreciate it if the ad hoc committee would, one, let me know also when you're going to meet, to consider cost reductions as a main focus to implement moving forward, particularly in this budget crisis period. Thank you.
Well, Madam President, you are a member of all committees, so your request is well taken.
Thank you. That's for
Colleagues,
Thursday.
are you prepared to discuss any questions you might have about grants?
I was hoping that you would go over, that Jeff or yourself could go over the grant piece, because it's only 3 pages, but basically highlighting $7.5 million reduction, the large reduction indicated in Title 1 and 2, and the FTE impact. Be facing layoffs or cuts, the board just needs to understand this $123 million area, and you're the experts on it. So we look to walk us through this, highlight the reductions, the impact on our schools, so we can be knowledgeable and prepared. Explain this to our constituents. So I'll throw the ball back to you and Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Woods. Jeff, you have the slides for the grant section of the budget. Again, if you could be at a high level of summary, some of that difference of 123 to 105, for example, which stands out when you review it, is not quite a cut, if you will. We need to explain that is the fact that when we start a school year, grants are fluid, colleagues. We receive new grants throughout the course of the year. So what might look like a increase or a cut is actually just what accrues during the course of the year. But we'll explain that to you, and then any of the other questions you might have. Jeff, you need to ask Mike to put some of those slides up, I think, if you can.
Okay, yeah, let me, I didn't email him that, but I'll send it to him right now. And while I'm doing that, there's a 3-page document that I pulled right out of the budget, and I extracted it, and you can see it starts page 61 of 134 through page 63 of 134. So this is the grants as we know them right now. And bear with me a minute. All right, so I sent that to Mike to put up the 3rd one. So first thing to know about the grants is that these numbers are fluid, and they change throughout the year, and they do change year over year. On the final page of the document, I do have a note in here, and this to me is always very telling, and that's why I added it in here. This was not part of the original budget, but I added the note for this meeting. So the 1920 projection, if you had last year's budget, was 102.2 million for 1920. And then when we did this projection in April, it was 123.5 million. So that gives you an idea of the change that happens with grants during the year. There are grants that are set to expire each year that sometimes we get carryover. There are grants that we have at a lower amount. Sometimes the title grants, we predict a reduction. and they come in higher. So there's increases there. There are new grants that we did not know about that will appear during, that we'll get during the year. So all of those types of things impact the number of the grant budget. So 105.9 million in the 2021 year, it actually is higher than what we had predicted at this time last year. And it looks like Mike does have it on the screen. So each of these grants, not every single one of them, but many of these grants are included in the school-based budget. So the general fund budget that the board adopts, it also includes the school-based budgets. The school-based budgets are made up of general fund dollars and grant dollars. So when you're looking at those school-based budgets, you are seeing the information that we have based on the grants that we know of at this time in there. So for instance, at the very top there's the Universal Pre-K program. If you looked at our elementary schools that have pre-Ks, they would have a portion of that in there. So the school-based budget includes these amounts. This is something, and again, we've been doing this, I think Keith Robertson put it together about 4 years ago. He developed these summaries and expanded some of what we do in the school-based budgets to make sure that we include everything, that when the schools are doing their budgeting, that the SBMTs are, they have their budgeting based on general fund dollars, based on grant dollars to the extent that we know them. And I do have I have Keith on the line here too, because he's really our grant expert and can probably speak to specific questions that the board has. But a few things that I'll mention as we can start scrolling down. There's receivership grants. And those receivership grants, they end in 18, which basically tells you that was the 2018 year. These grants we've been carrying forward because they've not been fully spent for the last several years. I understand they are supposed to expire this year, but based on history, they were supposed to expire 2 years ago. And there's, in those grants, 725, you're looking at about $3.5 million in those 4 grants, the 4 receivership grants. There's the Empire's still in there, the community school grant, similar. That particular grant was set to expire a couple years ago, and we've been allowed to get carryover. That one, we're projecting that it will not carry into the next year. We can't be certain that it won't, though. And that's something, we have to follow up again with it, but similar to the general fund, where the general fund is going to have unspent dollars because we've been working from, educating from home, and some of the things that were part of the general fund and some of the things that were part of the grants, we're not able to spend. And that means there are going to be dollars left over. And, we're hopeful that in instances where grants might have been set to expire without any type of carryover, that we're allowed to carry over into the new year some funds. This is typically something that we'd find in the coming months. And there's a handful of other grants in here that it looks like they're set to expire. I don't know, Keith, if you're on the line, could you speak to the My Brother's Keeper and Teach Tomorrow real quick?
Certainly. Yeah, can I just touch on what you were talking about? If you look at the grant letters, when you look at like receivership grant, and you see that first one is SO18, if that code is not 20 year, that means it's a grant we've had since the fiscal year, like 18 fiscal year, and they keep extending it. So at this point, we don't know if we have it next year, what's not spent. They haven't told us yet, so we don't budget what we think we may have left. So anything not ending at 20, and that totals up about $17 million on here of all of those grants that are older than this fiscal year that they keep letting us expend and carry on. Now, in terms of My Brother's Keeper, the My Brother's Keeper Challenge has not been renewed, but that we did get word is being extended into the year 2021. So we won't get any new money. We'll just get to run it longer for what's unspent. That's for both of the My Brother's Keepers, the SW19 and the SY20, My Brother's Keeper Challenge, My Brother's Keeper FCEP. In addition, we just got a new application for another My Brother's Keeper for just shy of $370,000 that we have applied for, but we had no knowledge of it when we were doing this budget. That would be another 370 added in. Teachers of Tomorrow, again, since this was done, they did release that second application, and we applied for $587,000 for that. In addition to that, the allocations just came out, preliminary allocations for Title I. So where we thought we were losing $1 million, we're really only going to lose $330,000. It's been reduced just by that much. So our preliminary budget is just over 27 million, not 26 million. And the same with Title I Part D. That's actually gone up to 268,000. And then the two IDEA grants have both gone up from 12.4 to 12.8 million and to 562,000 for those. So we've had some increases as we've just gotten preliminary numbers from the state. Is there anything else?
The category to where we apply for, how much we apply for each grant?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Looking for the category for each grant, how much we applied for.
What we applied for is what we're projecting. That's what we have applied for. We can go through every one of these once we do our final to see what our actual allocation was from what we'd applied. But at the time, this is what we believed we would be allowed to apply for.
I have a question, Paulette.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead, Madam President.
Thank you. Keith, I have a question about grants as far as how are they monitored? You know, do we have a set of procedures for the district that says that when grants come in, this is what we do? The reason where I'm going with this is that I'm concerned about what's going on now as far as we're not utilizing a lot of these grants. And I'm wondering do we become proactive as far as asking the organization or for the grant source to allow us to further extend or to use this money for the upcoming year? Do we have to, or do we wait until a certain period of time to do that? The other part to that question is that when we do not use grants, what type of accountability is in place in regards to that? So say, for example, we're approved for a grant, but somehow or another, it did not get used. Turn the money back, because with the ad hoc committee, I would think one of the things that they may want to take a look at is the amount of money that we are returning back that is not being used for the district, if that so exists. I'm not sure if it does or not. So my concern is, how does the procedures work? Do we tell people that if, how does that work? I mean, I know you're the guru and all that, but I'm just trying to figure out do we have anything written down to guide people moving forward on how these things should be done, and that are we doing them in a uniform way? That's my question.
Okay. We are putting together a uniform handbook with the grants department so that we will be consistent and be able to approach things all in the same manner. Right now, with the situation with the COVID, the grants department has reached out to all of the state departments, the grantors, to find out if we are in a situation of, are they going to extend the grant, meaning give us more time to spend it, or if we still have to close it. Let's say the grant ends June 30th, we close it and we say, we didn't spend $100,000. Can we have it in next year's budget?
Right.
So if they're going to allow carryover, or if we're in a use it or lose it situation. And the use it or lose it situation, we're trying to get their orders in and get that stuff processed and them utilizing that money as much as possible. So we do have that from all of those grants put together, and quite a few are letting us extend, or they're doing carryover and they're waiving it. Like for instance, Title I has a, if I remember right, I think it's a 15% carryover amount. That's the most you can carry over. Well, they're waiving that, knowing people are going to be in situations having more than 15%. So we're at an unlimited, we'll be able to carry that into next year's budget. We just don't know what the amount is until we close the grant in the fall, when the grant actually ends.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, the other one was, so is there a requirement, is a report generated when funds are not used that have been granted to the district, so that it can be looked into and to make sure that that doesn't happen again? How is that piece addressed?
The grant department, the grant liaisons have been reaching out to the managers of those grants and the administrators to keep regular tab on what's happening and what's going on. And they've been doing projections on all of the grants in terms of salaries to make sure that, you know, we may have budgeted thinking a person was in there for 50,000, and if they're in there for 60, we need to get more money in, and if they're in there for 40, we've got 10,000 to get out and use someplace else. So they're doing all those projections. They've been getting that to the managers, and so that we can start moving that money and having a good projection on that.
Okay, well, my other part of that question, Keith, is when grant funds are returned from the district as unused, what happens? How is that addressed? How do we make sure that you know? How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
All we do is we notify the manager and the administrator who ran that grant how it closed out at the end, and
Does
then
the superintendent get a report?
We can make a report, but we do not make it official. We do at every grant ending, we send out a memo how it closed. Your grant was for 100,000, you spent 60,000. That's what it was, and that gets sent out to them.
That gets sent up to the soup. Okay, I'm just wondering. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Yep.
Did someone? Can you hear me?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Okay, Keith, looking at grant page 62, you were going over the highlights of the significant changes. There were 3 grants. There, Transformation Grant, Indian Education Formula Grant, Avoidance Grant, and PEP Grant that indicate there's going to be $1 million loss in between those 4 grants. Is that because you don't know whether they're going to be carried over or you're going to get another year? Is that because there actually is $1 million loss?
The School Climate Grant and the Carol M. White PEP Grant, both of those are ending, and we have had a year of carryover to spend money. So it went from a 3-year grant, and they actually gave us 4 years to use it up. The Indian Education Formula Grant is taking a reduction based on the certifications that the federal government has on the students who qualify. And then the Sexual Risk Avoidance Grant, we are getting an extension on that to carry it into year 21.
Okay, so am I understanding you that the Carol PEP Grant, $346,000, that's money that's going to be returned, we weren't able to use?
No, that was the amount to use this year in our 4th year of a 3-year grant. And so we can't get another year out of them. So we're anticipating they will have spent all of that this year. That's why it's 0 for next year. The grant won't exist next year. Unless and we haven't seen anything from the federal government of a new application for that. Those 4 grants are directly from the federal government.
Okay, so that really is a $1 million reduction in the grant area.
I'm sorry, say that again?
That actually is $1 million less in grants that we'll receive in that area. Yes, it will, except for the 224, except for the 107,000 in Indianet. That comes every year based on the documents submitted to the federal government on student qualification. Okay, the 2 largest grants that impact staffing, one and the federal, you had indicated that there were going to be staff cuts, significant staff cuts. So what I'm hearing you say now is that based on the new numbers, we're not going to lose $1 million in Title I. We're going to lose less, and we're not going to lose $0.6 million in Title II. The question is, there's still going to be in staff, FTE reduction.
Well, with the Title I, we're doing our best guess at the staff on what we received from the manager, knowing they thought they were getting a reduction, but they're only losing 300,000. Now, will they choose to put that back in staff? I would imagine, but I haven't seen what they'll do now that they have a new preliminary number, so I can't say that. But Title I, a large part of that is the literacy coaches, which it's accounted for, the per pupil allocations in the school-based budget, which is accounted for, and maybe they didn't choose as many staff for next year, that could be. And then a large piece for non-public, and then the rest, I don't know where it will go now that they get more to write for, because they give us a draft budget so far.
Okay, when you say that literacy coaches, the reduction in from 260 to 31, that's why they cut our reading teachers and put literacy coaches in Fund 1. Can we now get our reading teachers restored because you now have Title I funds for literary coaches? I mean, was that the real reason why the shift?
The reason why the schools made their choices could be many, and I can't speak to it, but the Title I funds for the school-based budget stayed almost the same from this year to next year. I don't think it went down at all per pupil. It's based on pupils, on the bed stay and what goes to that school, and then how they use those funds. So that rate per pupil stayed the same from this year to next year. So this extra money I don't think they'll use it to, I don't know if they'll use it to increase that rate or if they'll do other things with it that they thought they had to reduce, like professional development or things like that.
I'm going to remind us of a time check, Paulette. It's 6:30.
Okay. Well, those were questions that I had on the grants, because it appears that here in the Title I could very clearly be connected to the we saw in our school budget, reading teachers, and on after school programs and on professional development. But I can contact you later because my schools were affected, and I'm going to be following up on that.
Okay. You can hold me up to August 28th. Then I'm retired.
And that's what my fear is, that all that knowledge is walking out the door. That's why I was asking about that manual, that procedural manual.
We're getting all of that together, putting a director of grants. She's going to be taking over, and we're trying to get everything mapped out so that there will be no lag. That's my goal.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've covered the 3 items on my committee, unless someone has more questions, Dr. Cash or Jeff, if you wanted to say anything.
There's hands up.
Maybe a hands up.
I didn't, looks like Kathy
Mike?
Brown.
Mike, could you take down the slide so I can see people? Okay.
Kathy Brown and Terrence, I believe. Is there somebody else had their hand up?
It was Larry, Terrence, then Kathy. That was the order it had gone in. Larry, Terrence, and Kathy.
I was getting ready to apologize because I think I did see somebody's hand before mine, so go ahead.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, it's a simple question. From my experience with grants, Keith, would some of these grants, including Title I, be available for renewal? And then the statement I want to make is often when entities don't use these grants, and I cringe when we have to send money back anytime.
Amen.
So when we send the money back, possibility to renew these grants, sometimes the funder or the awardee will look at you differently because you didn't spend the money. So I don't know, I don't want to confuse you, but it's sort of like a 2-part question. You want me to repeat it?
No, I understand.
Okay.
There is the possibility that the grantor will say, you know, we gave you money, you didn't use it. Why should we give you money again? And that way, when we talk with them, we always try to give reasons why we didn't get the spending done, whether, you know, whatever those situations were, circumstances. And I think most of them are pretty good at understanding. I haven't been aware of where anyone almost penalized us for not doing it. And sometimes when they've gone down, it's just, for instance, the Teachers of Tomorrow is going down quite a bit, but it's not because of what we did or didn't do. Statewide, they're just like, that's meant to get teachers, science, math, bilingual, and E&L teachers. They just don't have them. So they put out a big pot of money last year. No one could use. No one could get them. So they've reduced that allocation, and hopefully they'll put that money toward another grant for us that we can actually utilize, whether, you know, for Buffalo, everyone in the state. So they're not really penalizing us, but we are trying to be conscious of that and make sure what you wrote to do, you do. And that way it uses the money.
Thank you for that.
Okay, next.
If you was next, Larry.
So last summer, I met with the Homeless Alliance of Western New York, and they indicated to me that there is a state grant available to the district that we have not applied for several years, and we used to apply for it, and it's there, and we should certainly have access to it. I don't see it listed there. I see a homeless grant for a hurricane, but I don't see a McKinney-Vento grant. Any information you can provide on that?
Certainly. The McKinley-Vento grant, we did not get awarded the last 2 rounds, but it's a multi-year grant. You don't get to apply for it every year. So if it's a 3-year grant, you only get to apply every 3 years. A number of years ago, we weren't successful with the application. They tried again, and it still wasn't successful. So I think that's been about 5 years, you know, a 6-year cycle, let's say, where the district wasn't successful getting those dollars. But we don't have the opportunity this year to apply again. I believe this coming year is the end of the second 3-year cycle, so that would be the 6th year.
21 is when we apply again. 21 is when the application has to be submitted.
Why weren't we successful, Keith?
Since 2010, we have not had money from McKinney-Vento.
Yeah, I can go pull up the stuff I have. I don't have, but I know we were at the meeting. I know Mrs. Cottman was there at School of 12, and we met about it and went through why we weren't successful. Unfortunately, the feedback we received was off the cuff from the state, because when you're denied a grant, you have X number of days, whatever they decide, to get feedback. That letter didn't get to us until that window had closed, so we couldn't get official feedback. So we got it off the cuff from them. And the big one there was dollars were being used for transportation of the homeless kids, and they can't be used for that. They can be used only on a temporary basis, and they have to be very specific. They're like, okay, we're going to use X amount of dollars to get the students to school and things for 10 days, because that's how long it'll take to get their buses arranged for them. But it can't be anything long-term. And those were our biggest downfalls. They were putting in to use the money to do transportation for the students. And there were a few other things. I would have to get that file out of the grants department. But do you remember the meeting, Mrs. Cotman? At placement?
Yes, I remember the meeting. I also remember that Homeless Alliance said that they would work with us and make sure that we get that money that is coming up. And the application has to be in by 2021. And so I'm concerned, as most board members are probably concerned, that we make sure that we keep as many spots as we can for homeless children this year, because I happened to deliver some cards not too long ago, and there were a lot of children that were not living in homes. And I'm very concerned about some of the things the neighbor said to me. So I think we really need to take a look at that. We need to make sure that we get that approved. And my understanding was, in addition to what you said, Keith, is that we did not have the data to support. The necessary data had not been collected to qualify for the grant. So there needed to be some internal things done for pulling data together to make us eligible to receive that grant for 2021. And I hope those things have been put in place.
Good. I will see. I know there is a grant up in shared accountability to help them do data rebuild and things like that. So I will check and see if that's part of it, and we'll see what we can do there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, hey Keith, my question is, was concerned about you also. Congratulations on your retirement, and
Thank you.
thank you for all your service. My question was, how many grant writers does the district carry, now in 2020, and how many have we carried in the past? It seems like that with our budget, reading our budget, for the last, year, and seeing the direction that we're going in since the COVID, that grant writers is going to be very, very important for us in the future in helping us with our programs. And I'm thinking that carrying a number of grant writers on our staff, we can get a lot more work done as far as keeping programs, helping programs with inner city kids, working with our schools, like McKinley with their different programs with the building houses and construction and electrical and agriculture, the automotive over at Burgard, maybe even like the coding classes over at Bennett High School. I mean, I think that, we can pursue more grants to help us with our programs in the future. I think that we can go a long ways in saving monies judiciously. So I would just like to know how many grant writers do we have, will we have, or do we need to have more grant writers on staff to help out with, preparing for our future?
Right now, our grants department is one director and two other administrators, to make a total of the 3 administrators and 1 clerical person. And do I think we need more? I'm going to say yes and no. I think we could use our resources more wisely and organized and get some better results before we have to add things. And that would be something to look at. And I think if we look at what other districts are doing that are more successful, where a lot of districts the grant is becoming the center of everything for the grant, not just saying I wrote it and now I pass it on to someone else, being more involved. And I think if we readjust some resources, we can do that and be more successful. And then depending on if there's grants available out there, if we would need to increase, that would be something else down the road. But I think we could look at being more efficient.
Keith, before you leave on August, I'd like you to make your recommendations about how we could reorganize or how we could make some adjustments internally that you just alluded to. Leave me with a plan. Leave me with a plan that you have in mind. And I would answer Mr. Hurd. Thank you. I would answer Mr. Hurd directly that it's not how many grant writers you have, it's how many. And if you have one or two excellent top flight grant writers, you can get a lot of money because that's what they'll do for full time. And directors and administrators of a grants department aren't necessarily the same as having grant writers that specialize in that field. And since I've come here, I've been trying to get a best-in-class grant writer for us to work full-time on getting extramural funding in here. And I think that might be part of the consideration going forward, to contract the department, but go after a top-flight grant writer or two. And I think then we would start to get the results we're really after. Is that clear, what I was saying, what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Cash.
Any other questions?
We're getting up on 2 hours, and the only cautionary tale is we're going to have to go home for curfew, and I have several of my staff downtown at this time. Now, we could including Jeff. Jeff is downtown. Nate is downtown. Darren, I believe, is downtown. Mike Lucci is downtown. So I just want you to be aware of that. We have a hard curfew in place here in Buffalo for clear reasons. It's up to you though. Just wanted to remind you.
Would you like to get in touch with Chief Young at this point and tell him that we have people working in City Hall that may need to go over the time, just to make sure that they're protected in the event that they our liaison between the police department.
Well, he just sent out a buff alert. Mayor Brown did, reminding us of this. I don't know how those exceptions work.
I'll reach out to Chief and he'll tell us while we're here. Thank you.
Okay, does that conclude that concludes the finance? No other questions. Thank you so much, Jeff. You were excellent. Thank you, Dr. Cash.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, while President Kottman's trying to figure that out, the Executive Affairs Committee, we're just going to go right into it, guys. Kind of no breaks here. And it's pretty straightforward what we're going to be looking into. If you look at the agenda, it has that we're going to be looking into the Superintendent Evaluation timeline. We're going to also, brief updates on ad hoc committees. I would suffice to say that at least the Fiscal Stability Committee has already been we've updated. So on that, and then the executive session. I'm going to move right into the superintendent evaluations. And I've had conversations with the other 3 board members, so the 4 of us who have been on the board and have gone through this process already, just asking questions around what type, the tool, whether or not that tool is effective, whether or not we're okay with it at this point, because the nitty-gritty is in the month of June, we want to be able to do 4 things, right? And right in this time frame, I'd like for everybody to have, if you can pull it up, the documents that were sent to you today. It's just a tool for you to be able to look over and reference your calendars. Everybody got those the document that was sent, the template tools and the goals, the template goals that were sent out today. If not, just raise your hand and I'll have, I'll see if Darren or someone can send it out. So the 4 points, the 4 steps in the superintendent's evaluation would be conducted throughout the month of June, which would include special board meetings, right? One special board meeting. So one step is board members will receive evaluation documents for 2019-2020. I'll present the dates that kind of were given to me to make this work, where we have enough time in order to review and deal with this in between time. So this is projected for Friday, June 12th, that board members receive evaluation documents for 2019-2020. Wednesday, June 17th, Dr. Cash, I'm not sure, this was given to me, I'm not sure if this was something that was presented to you. I believe it might have been that you would be submitting your self-evaluation to us, the board, as of Wednesday, June 17th. You feel that that's a good enough time frame for you to be able to do that?
Depends on what we're evaluating me against this year.
I'm going to get into that too, because there's so much that we can't add up to, right? Like if you look at the goals that were put forth and that we all adopted and approved November of 2019, this particular board saw those as well. We all know that they are heavily affected by what we've gone through since March, and even moving up into March. Just because March 13th was the day that that happened, we had such insanity for almost 3 weeks before that, leading up to the actual day that we left. So all of that needs to be put into consideration as we do this evaluation. And we'll touch back in a minute to that. I want to go back to those steps and just make sure that putting that caveat in there, Dr. Cash, do you feel that, you know, that's even with that, you know, the board taking that in consideration, would that be a good timeline for you? Be Wednesday the 17th?
We'll do the best we can. We'll do the best we can. So
okay.
In short, we'll do the best we can.
Okay.
It's a different kind of year, and obviously the last 4 months of the year, we're on the phone and on screens and on meetings like this practically all day, but Darren and I will find some time to try to put something together for your consideration, recognizing that this is a year unlike any other. So we'll add some of that into the narrative, I suppose, is how we'll work it. Okay?
Definitely. And again, these are proposed dates. I'm not like, okay, these are the dates and that's it. So I'm just giving you the proposed dates, and then we can get into calendaring and all that. The next proposed date for the next step would be Monday, June 22nd, where we would, you know, with President Kottman's approval, of course, conduct a special board meeting for board members to discuss the individual evaluations. So our evaluations that because we're going to be asked to also evaluate Dr. Cash throughout this process. You know, these meetings, whether, you know, when they happen, there's going to be work in between. And that's going to be not only the ask, this is an incredible responsibility, one of the major responsibilities of this board. And we need to make sure we take time in our own schedules to be able to do the due diligence around this. We would have at that point, June 22nd, if every, you know, proposed date, if all of us could commit to making sure we have done our evaluation so that we can sit down, you know, over Zoom or however we're going to do it on June 22nd to go over our own, you know, evaluations of the superintendent. And then the fourth final piece of this is for the next day, actually, this is the proposed time, is the Board of Education will hold another special meeting. So it'd be like very quick, one meeting for us to discuss our evaluations, and then the very next day before our board meeting for June, we would have a special meeting again with President Kottman's approval to finalize his evaluation in an executive session. Those are the 4 steps. You know, we're going to get our documents. We're going to ask Dr. Cash to make sure that he gives us his evaluation. Then we'll have a special meeting to discuss where we all can, you know, our own thought processes and our own evaluations, and then we finalize that so that it's ready for the board meeting come the end of June. Now I'm just gonna open it up to.
Meeting, excuse me, colleagues, is the board meeting not the 17th this month?
You know what? I'm assuming that is. I just said that out loud and really kind of felt silly. We have to have this done by the end of June, so it's not before a board meeting. We're trying to get this done before the end of June. The reasoning that when I asked, I've been asking questions as to, you know, how the process. Obviously, given the tools to the newer board members in an earlier month would have been probably a better step, but considering where we are and all of the things that we've encountered, I really would like for us to be able to just, you know, let that go, understanding that we probably shouldn't have got, probably should have got those tools to you a little quicker. But I want to make sure that everybody is okay with just that timeline, whether or not those 4 dates, Monday or Friday, June 12th, to receive the evaluation documents, the goals as well, the goals that the superintendent had put out there. Again, we would be evaluating based on, you know, goals to a certain extent, making sure that we do take into consideration very heavily what we've come up against and obviously what the superintendent has had to come up against. Then Wednesday, June 17th, when he gives us his, you know, that's nothing we're doing in person, he's going to submit to us his evaluations. I assume we don't have to do this type of meeting, President Kottman. It's just we would get them over email, correct? It wouldn't be, Darren, it wouldn't be a formal get together for us to receive those documents.
That's over email. Correct.
Okay. Okay. So then that's a day, you know, because that's the board meeting that day. And then Monday, June 22nd, a special board meeting for us to discuss this. And I suggest we put aside a couple hours to do so. We've come up against, you know, we need to make this priority as far as like putting some work into it. It's one of the huge roles of the Board of Education. And then June 23rd, it would be a special meeting again, but basically just to summarize and put it together. So the one thing I want to get out of the discussion right now quickly is everybody available Monday and Tuesday? And should we make it for the same times that we would 5 or 5:30? That's the logistical piece. And then I'll also, any questions that you have for, you know, Dr. Cash, Darren, you know, myself, and Terrence and Kathy, I have your hands up here. Was that from previous or are they up for right now?
Previous. From previous, but I do have a question. June 12th is a Friday.
Right, that's not a meeting day. That'd just be when we receive over email the documents that we're going to be using to evaluate the superintendent.
Okay, and so then June 22nd, did you indicate that there's going to be a special board meeting to discuss the evaluation, an executive meeting in session?
Yes, it'll be an executive session. And
then June 23rd, not to cut you off, but June 23rd also will be an executive session or no?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it will. And President Kottman, I just want to refer to you because I don't want to, I'm not entitled to call that special board meeting. Is that work, you know, would you be calling that board meeting?
There's no problem. The meetings can be called without any problem. I want to also reference that there was a tool sent out to us too for the new board members if they're a little nervous. Darren sent out a preview of what the evaluation may look like. I think it was today. You have an idea of what the evaluation might look like, so you're not so intimidated by it. It's what he did it for. Okay. May I interject something right here for the employees who are worried about the curfew? I hate to come out of, but I know it's 7 o'clock and they're probably worried. Chief Young, Aaron Young, said he to show your ID if you're stopped, to give his name, and to tell the guards, whether it's state troopers or whatever, where you're coming from, and you should be okay. Okay, so they can stop worrying about getting caught up in that. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to put that in there because I know how Darren is. He's already looking at the clock.
You right about that.
Darren might not be okay. I don't know.
Well, I'm still gonna do my due diligence.
Listen to me. On a serious note, I don't know if that's fair to the employees. Now, maybe Darren can go home and get back on. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but I don't think that's right for him to have to be stopped in an environment like this. What's going on?
He may not get stopped. That's in the event he
could get stopped.
As chair, I'm going to chime in here and say we're wasting time even discussing it. I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that we're out of here in time. So I want to continue with the conversation. I appreciate the fact that you looked into that, President Kottman. Thank you. But I really would like to make sure that we get through that. Yes, sir.
I would like, with consideration and respect, to have the weekend of the 13th and 14th to get this material in, given the way these schedules are now. I am literally all day long working during the week with staff and on the work going forward. There's so many big issues we're trying to get ready for. So if I could have an additional 2 days for that weekend, that's when I get my best thinking, my reflection thinking is on the weekend. So if you could consider an adjustment to that timeline, it would be greatly appreciated by me.
Your submission, you don't submit to us until the 17th. We're receiving the documents. We're receiving like our tool and the goals for us. And Darren, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what we're looking at, right? We would be receiving the documents for us to utilize on the 12th, but Dr. Cash is not submitting his evaluation until Wednesday.
That is correct. But with those documents, Dr. Cash also in the past has produced other items for the board to consider.
Oh.
They consider their evaluation of the superintendent. Although his self-evaluation comes later and it's detailed, he does produce other documents when it says evaluation document.
I do remember that.
We have to remember those documents, Darren.
See you,
I have raised my hand, Madam Chairman.
I see that. I just want to address Dr. Cash, and I have Paulette and then Terrence, I saw you. So that's something for us to consider, two board members. This is true. He did add documents to the tool that we were using and our goals over the past couple of years. So consider that when we go over the timeline again. Okay, Paulette?
Yeah, I'm looking at the sheet that we were sent on the previous areas that we identified as goals. And my concern was that given the transition from buildings to an online school and the unprecedented amount of work that took, I think that would be something that would be acknowledged as a significant goal and feat that should be included in his evaluation, because I mean, we've had some serious overtime and he's made a difference. He fed our communities. I mean, I think there needs to be some additions and modifications to these.
I think I disagree with that. That is the tool that the superintendent has agreed for. We agreed if we were going to modify his agreement by his contract, it had to be done by September of this year. So if there can be areas within that tool that you can add additional things, there's no problem with you adding additional things. But to start modifying that agreement at this point is not within his contract. And I would suggest that we really consider that you can add in. There are areas in there that you can add in additional information, such as what you just referenced. That's what I'm saying. I think we need to keep it as simple as possible at this point. And Dr. Cash, and if he needs additional time over the 13th and the 14th, so be it. I don't feel that there should be a problem with us receiving his evaluation or the initial set of paperwork a few days later. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I just want to clarify what I heard Ms. Woods say. I don't think Ms. Woods is necessarily saying modify the instrument. I think that the subjective portion of the instrument, and I will provide additional materials as I've done in the past. I think she's saying just keep in mind the unique circumstance that we've gone through this year in completing your subjective portion of the evaluation. That's all. And there'll be an opportunity, I think, for you to do that within the current instrument if you're going to use the current instrument.
Well, the only reason I thought it was different is because Jennifer had already said that. And so I brought up that point up front. And so when she said what she said, I thought she was talking about enhancing that document. And that's why I brought that up. But that had been,
Oh, well, I'll clear up my meaning behind that because I think that confused I'm a little, yeah. So I want to go to Terrence because he did have his hand up. Paulette, if you don't, can you take your hand down so I know who else is coming? Go ahead, Terrence, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to ask Dr. Cash, how much time do you feel that you need to finish your report? Because due to all of the extra work that's been going on and just unforetold circumstances that happen, I'm real sincere about making sure that we receive a good report and making sure that you have the amount of time that you need, to complete the report.
Well, at this point, I'm used to doing a lot of work in a short time, and we'll go to work on it post haste. I hadn't given it a lot of thought up until this time, but 2 weeks, somewhere between the 15th and the 17th, you will have what you need to do your work. That's what I can promise.
So are you saying that you need 2 extra weeks? Is that way we can move on from it?
Not extra. I think that's on the timeline, 15th to the 17th. Somewhere between those days, you will have the full information. On the 15th, instead of the 12th, is when I'd like to give you whatever you said you need to start to begin to do your work. I'm still kind of a little confused about this, but
well, I want to I'll sum up where we're at with that. That's a good question, Terrence. That's kind of why I wanted to open it up to Dr. Cash first. When I did mention earlier, just to clarify the tools, making sure that the board members who had been there before, I think that I was basically saying that we can also be a support mechanism, or we can give insight to the new board members as to how we went about this. I wanted to check with them if there was anything that we needed to kind of go over, so we're all on the same page because of the time crunch in case other board members might need some help. But Dr. Cash, I totally hear you, and I do feel like if you can submit everything, so your evaluation, and make sure we get the documents we need, you take the time you need before that 17th, as long as that's, feel you can have your self-evaluation in as well, and still get us those documents. I think that that's, of course, is there anybody who disagrees and wants it on the 12th? As I believe that that's where we should, that's fine. That's awesome. Okay, so sorry.
I'm just suggesting the 15th Monday. I believe that's a Monday. I can get you, everything that you would need to get started, and then I'll provide the self-assessment no later than 2 days after that on the 17th, and I think that's still fit within your time frame.
That is the time frame. So everything perfect. That would be perfect. I see Paulette's hand. I do want to also throw out there, Paulette, I hear you. I'm going to get to you in just a second. Other point that we need to maybe not discuss today because of a crunch, but over email, we do need to discuss that last year. And I believe it's been said before, Hope Jay and the board actually agreed and put it into a policy, and I'm going to look for it right now. I have it right now. that the board also would be doing a self-evaluation of ourselves. And let me see, is board policy 2340, if you want to jot that down. You know, real quick, the board will review the effectiveness of its internal operations at least once annually and formulate a plan for improving its performance. The superintendent and others who work regularly with the board may be asked to participate in this review and to suggest ways by which the board can improve in functioning as a legislative body. So we did have extensive discussion about this last year. I was reminded of that. And, you know, it's my recommendation that we really, you know, look into doing this. I don't think it has to be done within this month as well, but I believe that this is something that we really need to look into. And we need to do. We did adopt it as policy, so just know that that's also going to be coming down the pipeline, that conversation. Okay, Paulette, Paulette, then Kathy.
Okay, my question is, I'm looking at the information we were sent. Goal number 5 says students with 15 or more chronic.
Paulette, you're going in and out. I don't know if you need to stick your face on the microphone, but you're going in and out here.
Look, one of the goals is about chronic absences. Goal number 5 was to decrease chronic absences. World, do we even measure chronic absences? 30% of our students didn't even log on and communicate with their teachers.
Look at it before the crisis hit.
What we're talking about for chronic absences on these goals that set.
I'm sorry, Larry, did you say something?
Let us make a proposal to you about it. I don't know if you can agree tonight about that. Let us make a proposal to you. It'll likely be something related to freezing at a particular date prior to the COVID shutdown. But, you know, I need to think about that for a few days, and we'll come up with something, okay?
So 2 things. I know Kathy is next, and then Larry, if you wanted to chime in, I heard you kind of chime in there.
Exactly what Dr. Cash said.
Yeah, so Dr. Cash, in the documents, the additional documents that you might add, this is kind of what you're talking about. You'll be proposing, you know, where the goals match with where things have been kind of awry. You'll be able to put something in place to help us along. Is that what that extra few days would be about? Just to clarify, that's what you're taking that time for.
Well, in part, but it's not a perfect alignment at this point. So part of it is to align and inform as much as we can to the goals that we set forth back in October or September. And then the other part is sort of an additional 1/3 really of this whole year has been committed to this COVID environment, as well as planning for next year, getting a budget passed that we did not anticipate to be this difficult, so forth and so on. So, you know, we'll outline some of the extraordinary circumstances, and I just want to give a thoughtful narrative to that rather than try to rush it, and that's why I asked for the extra time.
Thank you for clarifying, Dr. Cash. Okay, Kathy? Have your hand up and then it went away?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted some clarity. You mentioned a board policy. I didn't get the number, but you said that is a self-evaluation of this body?
Yes, we're to do a self-evaluation of the Board of Education.
And Ms. McCosey, not to interrupt, but I just emailed the policy to the entire board, so they have it.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Darren. Appreciate that. I was also well, first, I just want to make sure that we're good with this timeline then. Does that Monday the 22nd and then Tuesday the 23rd, Monday the 22nd being an extensive couple-hour meeting to go over what we've come up with as far as the evaluations that we've done for the superintendent, and then Tuesday, a special meeting, you know, probably not as extensive and long, just to kind of sum it up. Is everybody all right with those days? Did you have your calendars out? We're good?
Yes,
Okay.
if you could just send those email, all those dates.
I definitely will. We definitely will.
Darren can send that out to you.
Okay, you also mentioned June 12th and June 17th.
Well, June 12th is no longer the date. So June 15th, we're going to be receiving the documents, all the documents that we need. June 12th was going to be that date for us to be able to evaluate them. So the tool, and then the goals and whatever Dr. Cash is putting together to kind of align the goals with what we were dealing with COVID. And then on the 17th, we'll be receiving, according to Dr. Cash just now, we're going to be receiving his own self-evaluation. And then we'll meet Monday, the 22nd, to go over all of that, you know, compare his evaluation to ours and all that as the Board of Education in executive session. So the next suggestion is that we, in order to do that meeting, based on what we've done with special meetings before, is to make that an earlier meeting so that, you know, we don't have anybody, you know, we have evenings free, I guess. We can look into 4 o'clock maybe like we did last time, or 4:30 for June 22nd and June 23rd. Is that a possibility for everyone? I'm going to say, I believe they're Monday and Tuesday. Monday, let me check again. Monday the 22nd. Oh, where did it go? Timeline.
Yeah, that
Here
is
we
a
go.
Monday. Monday's the 22nd and Tuesday's the 23rd.
Darren, I'm over here trying to find it on my phone. Technology. I don't get it. But what was I going to say? If those are fine, by a show of hands, does 4 o'clock work for people? Does 4 work for you? Does 4 work for you?
Darren? Darren?
I'm here.
Jennifer, are you coming in and out? I have my hand up. I have a question I need an answer to.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay, so Darren, you have to pull the information together from the special board meeting, the information that Dr. Cash pulls, you have to give it to us, and then we have to get it back to you within a few days or not. I'm trying to figure out how does that work, because then you would have to pull all that together on the 22nd and the night of the 22nd to have it ready for the 23rd, or do you need a day in between that to do that?
No, it's very
I'm trying
similar
to see how that works.
Yeah, very similar to what I did last year. Once the meeting is over for you all on Monday the 22nd, you give me your evaluations, and then I spend that evening compiling it all with the comments, and then we actually send it back out to the board members on the 23rd in preparation for that meeting.
Okay, no problem. But you wanted, at one point last year, you wanted them to be submitted, people to submit them as soon as they had them for you.
And after, it was a year before last, the board wanted to meet prior to submitting them so the board could have discussion to ensure that all of the items Dr. Cash sent out and his self-evaluation were considered when board members were making their ratings.
Right. So as well, Darren, I mean, that was a really good question. As long as you know you got to work ahead of you for that night and you're good with that. I think, Sharon, you're the only one I didn't see your hand raised whether or not 4 o'clock worked for you. Does 4 o'clock work for you for those days?
It's fine. Those days are fine. Whatever time the board can do it is fine with me.
Okay, so Darren, it looks like that's the timeline. The 22nd, 23rd would be 4 o'clock for both days. Dr. Cash the documents will be ready for us on the 15th as opposed to the 12th. And the 17th, Dr. Cash will have his self-evaluation to us. So thank you all for that portion of the board meeting. And I do want to clarify too for the new board members, when you look at the tool, even if the goals, because the goals are not going to specifically align this time, for sure, it's going to be very confusing for all of us. That's why that meeting is important. You do have a space to comment on every particular category. and why you rated how you rated. Or you can be more in depth instead of just, rating the 1 through 4 system. So just know that that's very important. Those comments mean an awful lot. So be very diligent about how you go. If you want to put something out there, put it out there. That's what that space is there for. If there's no questions around the timeline around that, the next steps would definitely be, we'll be talking about the board evaluation too, and working that out over email throughout this whole process. The ad hoc committees, if there's any updates around those that are, pressing. So something that you would like the board members to, take action on, something that is necessary for all of, you want to make sure the public is aware of for the ad hoc committees. We definitely, this is the time to do that now. So I think it's, I think finance and the finance committee, we're good with our update, correct, Paulette? I think we covered a lot of it during your budget, your finance meeting. So who's Ann or whoever is first?
Go ahead, Ann.
Our committee did not meet this week because we were awaiting some information from the district about reopening and other plans. And we will meet again, pick that up on next Tuesday once some of that information comes through.
All right, 20-second update, nice. Can you do that, Larry? No, I'm just kidding.
So we met on Monday, and as everybody knows, we have a letter drafted for our state delegation, starting with the majority leader, Crystal Peoples-Stokes. All of you have responded to that and signed on in support. Thank you for doing that. That's where we are right now, and we're hoping to get that letter out as soon as possible. And then from there, having the conversations we need to have to start moving some legislation at the state level.
Okay, so is there any other questions around timeline or any of the committees? Right. Are we moving into executive session? Do I put or Nate?
Yes, if you, this is Darren. If you just give Mike Lucci a few seconds, we will have to shut off the live stream and give us approximately 2 minutes so we can set up for executive session, and then Nate will be to come up.
The board has to make the motion first, and then we'll take that break.
I'll make the motion.
I second it.
I'll make the motion. May I have a motion to go into executive session for the following purposes? 1, to discuss collective, the screen just went around. To discuss collective negotiations with the Buffalo Education Support Team. 2, to discuss employment of specific district employees. And 3, for the purpose of receiving legal advice. May I have a
move.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Favor? Thank you. The board went into executive session to discuss the matter. No actions were taken, and we have concluded our session. I'm turning it back over to Jennifer L. Macuzzi, board member, vice president, to conclude her meeting.
Thank you. So the meeting for executive affairs is concluded. I don't believe we need a motion to adjourn for a work session. So thank you everybody for coming out. Have a good day and pull your licenses out. You're 15 minutes over.
Yes, yeah, please.
I'm going to call Sharon Belton Cotman if I get pulled over, and you're going to.
You got home, Nate, just because you did that. Check on you.